Hello and welcome to the McTaggart Attack podcast. I'm Kevin McTaggart. I'm a stand-up comedian who lives in Vermont. And this podcast, the McTaggart Attack podcast, is basically how I give my opinions on whatever the fuck I want. Most of the time, it's what's pissing me off. Yeah, a lot of times sometimes I'm happy about stuff. Sometimes I give my opinions on things. Like I've given my opinions on things like Robert Pattinson as Batman. Go listen to that episode. I recently did an episode about cancel culture. I've also recently I did an episode about Common Core math. I've evolved the podcast over the years. This is the 200th episode of the McTaggart Attack podcast. I didn't know I'd be doing that many. And I see no reason to stop now. But the podcast has evolved. Like, it started on, the Mixkill Media Network. And, I did maybe one every 10 days. And now I'm doing a podcast on my own. And I do at least 3 a week. Holy shit. Thank you so much if you're listening to this. Thank you for downloading the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you like the podcast so much, tell your friends. Share it. If you share a podcast that I've posted on social media, like either Facebook or Twitter, I'll notice that because I'm on social media all the fucking time. So I will notice that. And make sure you use the hashtag McTaggart Attack whenever you talk about the McTaggart Attack podcast. Or the one episode I do a week where I rant about stuff for you. What's pissing you off Wednesday? You can use that hashtag. What's pissing you off Wednesday? Make sure you is in large capital letters. I don't know if that means anything for the hashtaggery, but I don't fucking care. Anyway, you can reach me, McTaggartAttack@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at KevMcT. That's KEVMCT, or the first 3 letters of my first and last name combined together. You can also find me on Instagram at McTaggartAttack. And there's also a Facebook page for the McTaggart Attack podcast. But this being the 200th episode, it's not anything special. There's no celebratory stuff. I did a little retrospective thing talking about its beginnings in the beginning of this podcast, but there's no special thing about this. I'd say the only special connection or thing I wanted to talk about was this is a topic I don't know if I've ever talked about on the podcast before, back when I used to do multiple topics at once on one episode, but I don't think I may have brought this up before, I don't know, but I feel like I want to bring it up again because I use my podcast as also a way of working on comedy material. You'll hear me talk about cancel culture and Common Core math in my stand-up routines, or whatever fuck else topics I've talked about recently. I'm going to be sipping coffee right now. Alright. See, but this topic, I'll do some explanation first. Well, the topic is people who call in to sports radio stations. I'm going to give my opinion on people who call in to sports radio stations. Sports talk shows. The people who call into them. I've been a fan of sports my entire life. And I've listened to sports radio almost my entire life. Whether now when it's ESPN radio or back when I was a kid in Boston, the first sports radio personality I think I ever heard was Eddie Andelman. And then he was the big one. I don't know where he is now. I think he's still alive. Google Eddie Andelman and find out if he's still alive and contact the McTaggart Attack podcast and let me know. And then, and I moved down to Florida. There was sports radio down there. There was John Moynihan, I want to say. And then Hank Goldberg, Hammer and Hank Goldberg, who's still around on like ESPN every once in a while, doing gambling stuff. And it's funny. It's like I listened to Hank Goldberg, and he hated this writer for the Miami Herald named Dan Le Batard. So I hated him too because Hank Goldberg hated him. And then now, flash forward to now, and the Dan Le Batard show with Stugotz is probably my favorite sports radio show right now. And Dan Le Batard's TV show, Highly Questionable, with his father, is probably my favorite show on ESPN. Poppy Le Batard is my favorite character on ESPN right now. And I'll get back to Le Batard later. But, like, one big thing with any sports radio talk show that I've heard during my life is always something that I've dreaded whenever I hear it. It's when they take calls, and get some poor schlub's opinion, or they have them call in, and sometimes they're angry, or sometimes they're just talking, sometimes they're a returning caller, a lot of times they're a first-time caller, and they always have to fucking tell you when they're a first-time caller. Who gives a fuck? Long-time listener, first-time caller? Who gives a flying fuck? You can see where I'm going with this. I don't see the need for people who call in the sports radio shows. I have called in to 2 sports talk radio shows in my life. It was the Jeff Cameron show was the first time, a show down in Tallahassee, Florida, where they were trying to figure out the kicker Scott Sisson's name. So I called in and told them, and they asked, hey, do you want to go on the air? And I'm like, no. And then, a few years ago, in the sports talk show that we have here in the Upper Valley called Franklin and House, they kept saying that Frank Wisenhunt was the coach of the Detroit Lions. And I knew that he was actually the coach of the Tennessee Titans. So I called them and corrected them. And then they asked me if I wanted to go on the air and talk about it, and I said no. So the 2 times that I've called into sports radio shows, I've said no both times about being on the air. Because I just wanted to correct them. Because their stupidity was pissing me off. And it's just, that's the thing though, like, it's just people who call into radio shows, I don't fucking understand it. Like, a lot of times for like the national shows, they're on the radio, they're on hold for hours on end. What the fuck are they doing with their lives? Do they have jobs? If they're on hold for so fucking long, don't they have any goddamn job that they should be going to? Why, if they are at work, how are they even doing that? How are they even explaining themselves? It's, I love when I'm watching a show, listening to a show like on Dan Patrick, the Dan Patrick Show, which takes callers in a limited capacity, which is good, which is probably best. Because they value the people's opinions, I guess, or something. I don't even know if that's a fucking thing, but sometimes the caller will be asleep. Like, I've heard that a few times. Like, on that Greg Hill show on WEEI, they have an ad where the caller's been asleep. He's been on hold since 6 a.m. And they're finally talking to him at 9:30, trying to talk to him. And he's snoring on the phone in front of everybody. It's hilarious. But it's just like, I don't understand. I would never want to wait on hold for hours on end to give my opinion on a sports radio topic. Back then, when I was first listening to sports radio, I still wouldn't want to fucking do it. When phone was your only means of communication besides face-to-face. But now, with the age of social media, why the fuck are people on hold all the goddamn time? Just wanting to get your voice on a radio show? And even when you're on the radio, when you finally get on the air, you're only on for like less than a minute on average. I mean, what the fuck is that? What was it really worth the 3 hours being on hold to like only get on for like a minute? What's the fucking point of that? What have you done? How fucking unproductive is that? To be on hold for hours to only get a minute of airtime. What type of boring ass motherfucker must you be to call into a sports radio show? Especially nowadays, in this age of social media, when most of these shows have a Twitter or social media account, you can just reply to them that way. And then they can read your name on the air. Reading your name on the air, that's basically all you fucking wanted anyway. Like, here's Kevin from Vermont. And then I give my opinion. But I was just excited about, oh, Kevin McTaggart tweeted this. I've done that. I've tweeted in the shows. I had a Twitter beef with Jonathan Coachman of ESPN Radio one time. He was talking about how boring the NFL Hall of Fame is. And he was comparing it to the WWE Hall of Fame, where they have a time limit for the WWE Hall of Fame. And I let him know that's not the same thing. It's not the same fucking thing, Jonathan Coachman. But that's a Hall of Fame beef that I don't want to give right now. I'm just really oh my God. It's just, I don't understand the people that have all the time to call into sports radio shows. And I want to get back to what I said about Levitard, because the Levitard show is the show that enlightened me on this whole calling in thing. Because Levitard said that, any show that uses callers to call in to give their opinion for the majority of their content, the show has no content. It's a lazy show to do. We'll just take calls for 3 hours. For 3 hours, you're going to talk to unruly, idiotic motherfucking fans? That's it? That's all you've got? You can't come up. You run a radio show. You're hosting a radio show. And all you're going to do is talk to people the entire fucking time and not have any thoughts of your goddamn self. You can't come up with 3 hours of fucking content for a goddamn motherfucking radio show. Maybe you shouldn't have a fucking radio show if you're just gonna be fucking talking about that. If you have nothing to talk about except take goddamn stupid ass motherfucking calls from people who have no fucking stupid ass goddamn motherfucking opinion anyway, and it's just fucking ridiculous, and you should all just be fucking ashamed of yourself, and that's the bottom line. If you smell what the McTaggart Attack podcast for the 200th time is cooking.